I'll never forget my brother. I'll never forget my Gemini twin. I love you, and just save a spot for me, bro.
This is a family that lost their son and their brother through an act of violence at the hands and the feet of people who had been charged with keeping them safe.
Good morning and welcome to NBC 6 Voices. I'm Jawan Strader. Tyre Nichols, the latest name to be added to the list of black Americans who lost lives at the hands of those who took an oath to protect and serve. And as he was laid to rest earlier this week, the unrest over policing practices across the country continues to fester. Is there a way for black and blue to coexist? That's the big question. So here to talk a little bit more about this and this question and everything that has gone down and what has happened, with me I have former federal prosecutor Chris Lomax, now of Lomax Legal Law Firm. I have Sergeant Jean Poix of the Miami Police Department, and Larry Hill, former Chief Inspector and Executive Officer of the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. And before we begin the discussion, I want to say that we are not going to show the video, the disturbing video of the deadly attack on Tyre Nichols. Now, if you haven't seen it, you can always go to social media, you can go to internet, it's all over the place on there, but we've decided not to show it for you this morning. First and foremost, welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, well, Larry, I'm going to start with you because you work in Memphis. You work there in Memphis. So I want to talk about the video. You've seen the video. You've seen how things were handled. So I got to ask you, since you spent a great deal of your time in law enforcement, the training at the academy, anything in that training that warrants what happened to Tyre Nichols in that video?
First of all, let me just say, prayers goes out to the Nichols family. To answer your questions, no, there's not anything that warrants that during that stop. However, I like to say that during that stop, the officer, from a training standpoint, failed to provide that due care and safety to themselves. So that is not an approach, to that. They also failed to provide the duty of care, to aid, as well as intervention to the victim.
And your thoughts.
I would concur with my distinguished guest here, but I'd like to add another element to it. From what I'm seeing, I think it comes back to implicit biases, right? Because one of the questions we're hearing is, well, how is it that black officers were able to do this to a black person? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from my experience, when, for instance, when we go to roll calls, and whenever you hear a bolo for a subject, most of the time it's black male. Doesn't matter if you're in a predominantly Hispanic, white area or black area, it's always black male. And so, to me, the black community is devalued. Black life is devalued. And so a lot of these specialized units that crack down on these in these lower economic communities tend to be black. And so the value system to appreciate black life and the black community is not there. And so there's no accountability. So for instance, you don't tend to see that in the white community. Black or white officers mistreating white suspects that way.
All right, so Chris, after the quick release of the names of the 5 black officers, which you're taking a look at right now, accused of beating Tyre Nichols to death, we learn of a 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, who is Caucasian. He has not been charged as of right now, and who investigators say not only pulled Mr. Nichols from the car, he also attempted to taser him as well. He also has been cooperating with the authorities. What does this tell you about the case that prosecutors are building?
Well, I guess first and foremost, we should be very careful about speculating at this point about why anything is happening, and we should be very careful about reaching any conclusions about why a person has been charged or not. But there's a very obvious difference between the 5 officers who were charged and the one who was not charged. And I don't think I need to point that out for you. We can look at it and we can see it for ourselves. And unfortunately in America, this is what it means to be a person of color on an everyday basis. You are able to be judged, you're able to be prosecuted, persecuted, evaluated at first glance, just based on the way that you look. And whatever information is available to the prosecutors, whatever information is available to the police department about what this particular individual did will be analyzed and scrutinized. And that department's decision about how to treat him and the prosecutor's decision about how to treat him will be under a microscope, because it appears that he was there. He was involved. Not a single officer intervened. Now, that's just a fact. I didn't see, from my review of the video, a single officer who intervened on behalf of Tyre Nichols. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a duty to protect. There's a duty to intervene. And a failure to act on that can be a federal crime.
Many people are saying that the police chief there in Memphis should lose her job. Do you believe that should be the case because the officers were underneath her?
In my opinion, I don't think that should be the case. But I do understand the accountability and responsibility as a person in her position. However, those who are operating in that unit that fail to abide by policy procedures, you know, those units will work and can work, but it depends on that proper leadership at that lower level under their command to guide and lead them in that right direction in order for them to, you know, get the results that they want. But I don't think that it will grant her position, but at the same time, at the top, you are responsible for top and bottom.
I was, as a senator, as a United States Senator, a co-author of the original George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And as Vice President of the United States, we demand that Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Joe Biden will sign it.
But some of us do this every day. Some of us believe in the dream has to come true. Some of us are going to fight until we make this legislation happen. I don't know when, I don't know how, but we won't stop until we hold you accountable.
Well, you know, it's interesting. At the funeral, I heard Reverend Al Sharpton, as well as President Biden, again, try to call for the passing of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And of course, it would take Congress in order to do that. And we see the makeup of Congress now. Do you believe this is just an example that it needs to be? I want to ask all of you this question. Does this need to be passed? Does this need to be passed?
Absolutely. So just by way of context, one of the reasons why that law needs to be passed is because the standard by which a prosecutor needs to provide proof to demonstrate a violation, a federal violation of a constitutional right, is supremely high. You have to demonstrate willfulness, which in layman's terms, you have to show that the officer knew what he or she was doing was wrong and then chose to do it anyway. Not that it was negligent or reckless or an accident or just bad judgment. Only willfulness is enough to obtain a federal conviction. The George Floyd and Policing Act would provide other avenues for prosecution that may serve as a deterrent or serve as a mechanism by which there can be accountability. But even if we pass that act, even if legislation is put into place, the deeper question that has to be asked is, how does this happen? Can you imagine if you walked onto the street right now and saw 5 people brutally beating another person? Would you just stand there? Would you just walk by as if nothing was happening? Well, we had law enforcement officers who are bearing witness to what ended up being a murder. Why? And why? That's the question that has to be asked, is why? How does that happen? What is the culture that has invaded policing that will allow officers to be party to, witness to this type of conduct and not do anything about it?
And with that said, all of you, I have to ask you this question, because me as a black man, I was very disappointed to see that these are black officers. I want to ask you, and you guys are in law enforcement, how did you feel knowing as black men to see officers behind this brutal beating?
You know, and that's the thing. It's saddening. It's disheartening to see when we talk about social justice that we try to achieve from the opposite race doing something to us. But yet here we are, you know, as African Americans, and we're seeing it for ourselves. It's like, it really just leave you dumbfounded. How can, it's just no room for it. It puts you in a position where it's like, really, is this us doing this to us? And to go out here, and 27 years in my career in law enforcement, I never felt something like this hit home.
Yeah.
Where it's like your brother is beating you. Your brother don't have love for you.
John, I want to know your thoughts.
Sure. I was angry. I was disappointed. I felt that, you know, as African American officers, law enforcement is not a career that's easy to get into. As African Americans. Usually we're the best of our community, and so when you go out there as a black officer, the community may not necessarily always like police officers based on their experiences, but they do look up to you. They feel that you should protect them, you should advocate for them, and so you let them down. And like Tyre Nichols' mother said, you're embarrassment to your family, you're embarrassment to your community. Like, how do you even explain it? We talk about, you know, white on black police brutality, and here you are abusing us. It's just a bad look.
Yeah.
And I want to leave the final word with you in regards to that.
But what I'll say is that power is a dangerous drug. And no matter the color, creed, background of the person who holds the power, there must be a fierce dedication to integrity and a reluctance to abuse that power. And we've seen time and time again in so many different contexts that when power is transferred, there's abuse and no accountability. And in this situation, I think that it doesn't really reflect so much on the color of the officers. It's the culture of the officers.
And we'll leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this all-important conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.